Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh, welcoming you to an all new World of Warships gameplay today on our channel. In this episode I'm sailing out in the Tier 4 Japanese Premium Battleship known as the Ishizuchi in a Tier 4 domination game on the map New Dawn. The purpose of today's video is for me to give you an informal review of this ship based on my experience so far. And to understand my preferred playstyle, we need to take a look at my opening game plan, which will be an aggressive push towards Charlie. This is enabled by the fact that this is one of the fastest battleships at its tier, coming second only to a fully upgraded Myogi with a top speed of 28 knots. By comparison, this ship will travel at 27.5 knots as standard without the speed flag. The reason we can be so aggressive then is the fact that we can follow our cruisers and destroyers that go towards an objective close behind, and in turn this means we can try to punish those enemy cruisers that would have escorted their own destroyers and be given broadside to open up all their guns on our destroyers as they go into the objective, and in return we can open fire with all of our guns to rip apart the enemy cruisers that are there, or at least that's my thought process. Now it's not just about top speed, you also have to consider this is quite a manoeuvrable ship in the fact that you have a 740 metre turn circle radius and a rudder shift which is manageable at 12.9 seconds for a battleship. This means you can show some tactical flexibility and change direction on the fly compared to some of your competitors. The only downside of this is the fact that your strong manoeuvrability goes against the poor concealment of the ship. We're not running Concealment Expert here on our 10-point captain, we've gone for Fire Prevention, so you're seeing this ship at its maximum weakest concealment, in that you have a Detectability by sea of 14.7 kilometers, by air 11.2 kilometers, and from firing in smoke 11.8 kilometers. This means that as you make your way towards a certain point on the map, if the enemy team have the opportunity to spot you in open water, they're going to do so, and I'd recommend where possible trying to use land masses to conceal your approach if you're going for an aggressive push. Unfortunately here, what if Charlie having a number of open water sections on the route towards it, it means we are going to get detected by the enemy destroyer that goes to contest objective Bravo, but there's nothing we can really do about that. Now coming back to the detectability by air in general, this combines with another key weakness of the ship when there's carriers in the game, whereby you have poor detectability by air and your AA suite is absolutely abysmal. 6 single firing 76.2mm guns with 10 damage per second and 3 km range. You are not going to be down in that many aircraft even against tier 4 carriers, and this means that you are going to be a free lunch in the eyes of many carrier players. So if there's a carrier in the game, you'll need to stick close to friendly cruisers. Going off alone is going to be suicidal in the long run, but fortunately we don't have that here. But as we get closer and closer to Charlie, we can already see how we're quite close behind our friendly Phoenix, and in return this means that we can provide that supporting fire to our teammates who go to contest the objective and start to look towards the enemy Phoenix and Danae who are pushing close to Charlie. We'll be getting ready some armour piercing shortly, and this is where we come onto the artillery of this ship. 5 twin 305mm artillery batteries mounted in an ABMXY configuration. The downside of these guns is that they're not reliable at distance, with a maximum dispersion of 194 metres at 15.3 km max range. And on top of this, the armour piercing the ship has a very bad rap when you hear about it, in that it's seen as very unreliable even against cruisers. But, going against the curve, what you'll find is when you close the distance to 10 km or less against a broadside cruiser, your armour piercing can achieve some pretty nice results. And that's just one example there, ripping apart the majority of the health of the enemy Danae, picking up 3 hits, 1 over penetration and 2 Citadel hits, Citadeling for 8,000 damage a turn with an armour piercing shell. And we hope to finish off the Danae for a successful high explosive salvo. We're going to need 3 or 4 hits to do so, as our maximum high explosive damage per shell is 5,200. That means you've got very strong high explosive alpha, but your armour piercing alpha is rather poor by comparison with a good number of your competitors. So you will need to rely on high explosive to deal the majority of your damage, and that gets added to by the fact you have a base fire chance of 32% as seen on screen today. But never be afraid to use armour piercing in the right situation, particularly against broadsiding cruisers at medium distance or less. Now the downside to the armour piercing is it's only really reliable when you get into the idle distance range against enemy cruisers. Against a battleship such as a South Carolina, or alternatively the enemy Myogi that's headed this way, I'd need to close the distance to 5 km or less I personally feel to be able to get consistent results and to be able to accurately plant shells beneath the turrets of those ships. Because what you'll find is one other key weakness of the Ishizuchi is its armour profile. It's lacking compared to its battleship competitors. Now to understand this, firstly we're about to take some torpedo hits, or some incoming torpedoes I should say, from the enemy Clemson, who's fired them right on the maximum range, i.e. 5.5 kilometers, and we'll see that the first set of torpedoes will fall short, the second set, well, they're going to come a lot closer to the ship. And you only have a 7% torpedo damage reduction when you take a torpedo hit towards your torpedo belt. But the odd thing about this ship is the fact that firstly it has no torpedo bulge, secondly it only has 203mm of armour on its belt on the side, and a 19mm citadel plate under the waterline. This all combines together to give you a ship that's incredibly fragile compared to the rest of its battleship competitors, and even the Miyogi, which shares a very similar armour profile to your own ship, has a 34% torpedo damage reduction percentile when it takes a torpedo hit towards its torpedo belt. This means that you cannot afford to get hit by torpedoes, alternatively expose yourself to a maximum possible battleship broadside. You're going to need to rely on angling the ship, and nor can you afford to just simply point your nose towards enemy battleships because you only have a 19mm bow armour plate, and that means you can be overmatched on the bow by all the battleship guns you are ever going to face at your tier. But there we can see the armour piercing against working into our favour against the broadside of an enemy cruiser, wiping the Phoenix out and picking up a devastating strike. So that's where the armour piercing can do us favours, but now we're switching back to high explosive to try and bring down the health of the enemy Miyogi and the enemy South Carolina. And what you're going to see here is I'm going to use the manoeuvrability of this ship in order to conceal my position for a little bit longer, in the fact that I will be spotted by the South Carolina and the Miyogi, but I'm turning towards the landmass and I'm going to intentionally beach. The idea behind this is I limit the firing angle that the enemy battleships can get on me, and in return it means that I can afford to angle the ship against the Miyogi's rather impressive 356mm caliber guns from what I recall, and bounce the shells rather than take them. Now in return it means I lose my firing solution on the Miyogi, but this buys me some time to reposition my ship. And what we'll see is with the enemy Clemson now pulling out of their smoke, whilst they're now detected and they're close enough to hit us with their torpedoes, it would look as though they've actually fired their torpedoes from within their smoke rather than as they've been coming away. And in return what this means is that they fired their torpedoes from just outside the potential range to hit my ship, which has worked out in my favour, rather than by the time it gets a little bit closer as I've gone to beach. As we try to finish off the Clemson, and here we can see where the dispersion of our guns works against us somewhat, as we're going to need to bring the back guns in line to finally bring this Clemson down, fortunately firing just as they became unspotted. Now I'm taking a lot of damage from the front of the ship, and this is where I'm being over-penetrated on the bow, and this is where the armour profile is really being punished by the two battleships ahead. But as you can see, as time goes on, I'm using my heel to offset as much damage as possible, and on top of that I'm getting ready to angle against the incoming fire, retreating as well, so that way I can pull some distance and make the dispersion of the incoming battleship shells work against my opponents. And here's those torpedoes I was telling you about, which have been fired from too far away, and that means we've been able to avoid any further torpedo damage, and we won't be seeing any more torpedoes in the rest of this match. Now here we're getting pounded time and time again by the South Carolina and the Miyogi, not angling enough against the incoming salvo there, but trying to angle now. And what you'll see is after reversing for some time, I will be going forward towards the landmass directly in front, the idea being to use that to conceal my position and get ready to change up my approach. Because now as we move into the second half of the game, effectively, having taken Objective Charlie of our teammates and Objective Bravo being in our team's hands, and the enemy team labouring over Objective Alpha, we now need to bring down these two battleships through sustained high explosive fire. But note the inaccuracy of some of our salvos here and the frustration that I'm feeling, simply because dispersion is not working in my favour and I'm not able to set any fires or do any alpha damage towards the South Carolina here. Going for another salvo, opening up. One thing you do have to consider in your favour of your guns, despite their poor accuracy, is the fact that they have the fastest reload as standard at your tier. 25 seconds, and we are using the tier 2 Captain skill Adrenaline Rush to bring that down. This means that whilst you may miss an opening salvo, you are going to get more salvos per game available to you compared to your competitors. And this means that whilst you can keep dumping out the fire, over time the number of fires you set and your overall damage output will increase to your advantage. As we go for some hits on the enemy South Carolina, and again we miss, straddling their ship. Now moving forward towards the landmass directly in front, we're going to use this to buy some time and afford us the ability to turn the ship around. Now you know I need to turn the ship around because if I start pushing forward again, I'm going to get ripped to pieces by these two battleships who are now splitting. They'll be able to engage me on both sides. So what I need is for my teammates behind me to push forward and take some attention, and that's what they're doing. I've noticed on the minimap. I'm not having to tell them to do so. Aquachi is pushing forward towards the enemy South Carolina over time, although it actually appears as though they're turning away right now. But the Svetlana, on the other hand, is definitely pushing forward into open water, and this, when the Miyogi and the South Carolina realise they do not have a shot on me, will cause their attention to be diverted, and I'm waiting for the Miyogi to fire their guns. They've now fired, and it means I can use the manoeuvrability of this ship to start turning around in front of them. It's a risky gambit, I must admit, simply because if the Miyogi's guns fire faster, I called this wrong, they'd be able to hit me on a completely exposed broadside without any angling whatsoever, and it'd be very likely to pick up a citadel or a maximum possible penetration available to them, and take me out of the game or put me down to say my last 5,000 health. But here, as we now make the turn in front of them, we set them on fire using a high explosive, which is what we wanted. We want them to use up their damage control party if it's available and start tapping into their heals. And we're starting to turn away. And note, whilst they're able to fire here, we've angled the ship just enough to avoid taking the citadel, and that's kept us alive. Called it very close, but it's worked out. And we now have the South Carolina dumping shells into our aft section, and we can see again the aft being overmatched by an armor-piercing shell there. Annoying, but it's something we have to deal with. But as we start to pull the distance, this is where the Ishizuchi actually comes into a world of its own, in the fact that the gun's firing angles, particularly on the centre gun, are more suited to kiting than to forward play. In the fact you're able to get a better firing solution with all 5 of your gun turrets when you're pulling away from an enemy target rather than pushing towards it. You have to expose less of your ship. And this means that we can really start to rip into the enemy Myogi through successive high explosive salvos, and we can see the Alpha Strike damage going to work, and with the fires we've got set, the damage tally in the top right corner of your screen is only going to increase over time at a rather nice and steady rate. As we pull back as well, we can see now that the advantage you have in the fact you have 10 guns to say the Myogi is 6 is that whilst you have poor dispersion, like the Myogi has poor dispersion at longer ranges, you can dump more fire towards the target and therefore have a higher probability of achieving a hit. And we can see that we scored 5 hits and actually set a fire as well, whereas our opponent only managed to pick up 1 successful hit there, and this is going to work in our favour. As now we can see the health pools are becoming reversed, despite the fact we started off this engagement with significantly less health. As we throw in another salvo, Adrenaline Rush giving us the ability to bring our salvos out faster, the Myogi's health pool is really coming down. Another 3,500 damage salvo there, whilst we may not be tapping into our armor piercing, as our opponent is, and only pick up 1 hit by comparison, and we can now aim to finish them off with this final salvo. And there we go, picking up the Arsonist along the way for the number of fires we set and the subsequent fire damage. Now we have to deal with the Corvette, the Tier 4 French battleship. And here's one of the difficulties with the guns, in the fact they have a 180-degree turn time as standard of 41.9 seconds, so they will take a long time in order to turn to the next target. But we're fortunate in the fact that our next opponent was coming up on our effective broadside as we're turning away from the previous engagement, so it means it doesn't take us too long to reallocate our guns to the next target. Whereas earlier on, when we saw ourselves pushing in towards Charlie, note how long it took for us to turn our guns to deal with the enemy Phoenix, then turn our guns back towards the enemy Clemson, etc. So knowing which targets you're going to attack in order will prove useful to your ability to dump out more and more fire in this ship. As we pick up a second fire on the Corvette, and that means their health pool is really going to start coming down as we pick up the high caliber, reaching 98,000 damage in this game so far. And really now it's a case of trading high explosive salvos, where we're hoping that the Corvette's apparently rather poor dispersion, or at least poor lead given by their captain, means that over time we are going to rebalance the health pools of our 2 ships in our favour, with the fires also working out. You'll note that I have my damage control party ready. I also have 1 heal remaining, meaning if a fire is set I can try to offset that as much as possible, but it really comes down to dispersion, appropriate lead, and our fire chance working in our favour, by that 32%. Which is less by comparison with the Tier 4 Orion, which has a 40% base fire chance from what I recall, but still 32% on 10 guns when they do hit the target, unlike that. It's pretty nice. Now, is there anything else to consider at this point? Well, one other thing to note is whilst we used them earlier, we didn't really talk about them, is our secondaries, of which we have a combination of 6 76.2mm guns which fire high explosive, and 16 152mm guns that fire armour piercing, which fire out to a range of 3.5 km on both calibers. You're not going to get too much out of your secondaries, but you can use them to threaten enemy destroyers that sail too close to you. And that can happen on quite a frequent basis if you decide to be really aggressive in the ship thanks to its manoeuvrability and speed as discussed at the start of the gameplay. But your secondaries in my experience are nothing major to note. You can buff them through advanced firing training, i.e. the captain skill, which will take their range out to approximately 4.2 km from what I remember. But at the end of the day, I haven't found the secondaries as something to shout home about. And we're here using the landmass in order to conceal the fact that we're going to be turning back towards the Corvette and trying to get a little bit closer in order to finish them off, as we're really eager to see them out of the game so that way we're not going to be taken out, and also at the same time try and pick up our Kraken. We set another fire there, the health's going to continue to bleed down. As we can see in the top right corner, the ticker's still going, and we're just going to keep dumping out the high explosives, spamming it away until we finally bring down this battleship to wrap things up. Now, it's worth noting that this ship does have a reputation of being a high explosive spammer, and we have seen the majority of our salvos have been high explosive. as we finish off the corvette finally and pick up our Kraken. But every so often, remembering you have armour piercing is going to help out, as we did see earlier. And for our final plan of this game, we're going to be making our way towards Objective Bravo. We have 2 objectives to the enemy's 1. Our points advantage is just over 600. It's unassailable, based on the time that's remaining in the game and the positioning of our ships and their health pools versus the 2 enemy ships that are remaining, plus the destroyer, I should add. When I say 2 enemy ships, I mean the Kawachi and the St. Louis. And that means that as we head towards Bravo, we only really now have to bide out our time and let the points advantage head towards 1,000 in our team's favour. As for what happens in the rest of this game, as we close the distance towards Objective Bravo, one of the 2 enemy ships contesting the objective is spotted, that being the St. Louis. And I fire 1 salvo to reset their progress, but beyond that nothing much else happens, apart from the ticker going up to 1,000, so we may as well start moving on to the post-game stats. So in what was a rather hard-fought victory in the end, we can see that our battle performance amounted to a total damage output of 120,787 HP. Along the way we picked up 5 achievements. An arsonist for setting an enemy ship on fire and destroying it, where the damage caused by fire must exceed 40% of the destroyed ship's normal health pool, in this case the enemy Miyogi. The devastating strike for destroying an enemy ship with a single artillery salvo, torpedo salvo or aircraft by causing damage to over 50% of the destroyed ship's normal health pool, in this case an artillery salvo on the enemy Phoenix. The dreadnought for receiving damage exceeding 120% of our ship's normal health pool from 4 or more enemy ships and survived the battle. The high caliber for damage at least 4 enemy ships, where damage caused must exceed 30% of the total HP of all the ships in the enemy team. And finally, the Kraken Unleashed, for destroying 5 or more enemy ships in a single battle. In coming on to the team scores, we can see that we topped our team in terms of base experience earned, picking up 1,665. Our roll over the course of this game can be split into 2 halves, joined together by the manoeuvrability of this ship. The first half was supporting the aggressive push in towards Objective Charlie, where along the way we helped our team to eliminate 2 light cruisers and an enemy destroyer. Then in the second half we had to move into a kiting role, having tried to make the most of our 45,700 HP base health pool and combine that with the damage control party and damage repair party consumables to keep our health topped up, but we couldn't afford to be as aggressive, having used a good chunk of our health to take Charlie. So then we started to pull away, pulling away from the enemy Miyogi in South Carolina, returning fire with high explosive, particularly on the enemy Miyogi, to cause that battleship to burn to death, and then having to do the same against the enemy corvette that came down the western side of the map. And coming on to our detailed report, we have 2 key items to note here which both revolve around the concept of fire damage. Firstly, in the damage caused category, we can see that the 12 fires we set amounted to a total damage output of 33,129, or approximately a quarter of our total damage output. This reflects the strong fire chance on the Ishizuchi as base of 32%, and how you are encouraged to use that as much as possible to really start bleeding down the health pool of the ships you engage. On the other end of the spectrum, when we look at the damage we received, we can see that only 1 fire was set on the ship, amounting to a total damage output of 979. This is because I've been running the fire prevention captain skill on the ship at tier 4 on my 10-point captain. As standard, I've found the Ishizuchi without this skill is incredibly susceptible to fires being set on it, and that means you can lose a lot of health over the course of the game through people tossing high explosive shells at you, particularly if you bump into the tier 4 British battleship, the Orion, with a 40% base fire chance. So having fire prevention, which reduces the fire chance on your ship by 10% and means only 3 fires can be set, maximum at any given point in time, rather than 4, is really going to work to your advantage. And in this gameplay we're fortunate that our battleship opponents, apart from the corvette, were focused on firing armour piercing at us rather than high explosive in the long term. And finally, coming on to credits and experience earned, we can see that after additions and deductions, we walked away with 237,325 silver credits and 3,822 commander experience. To conclude, if I had to summarise the Ishizuchi in a single phrase, it would be a ship that leaves a lot of captains in hot water, whether they are captaining her or facing her. From the perspective of captaining her, you'll find there is a key contrast between the ship's manoeuvrability and rather poor armour profile, which means you can be aggressive in your positioning, but you need to be careful not to be too aggressive as to expose yourself to broadside hits and in return lose your health pool faster than you would expect. When facing the ship on the other hand, you'll find that due to a fast fire rate and our 5 twin 305mm artillery pieces and the likelihood of the shells coming your way being high explosive, fires are going to be plentiful and you need to be ready to try and mitigate the incoming fire damage. And as for cruiser captains, do not feel the need to show the ship a broadside at 10 km or less, because the savvy Ishizuchi captain will know to switch to armour piercing and be ready to punish you for your mistake. But with that, I've been TX141. And if you have enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future World of Warships videos on my channel. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking to get into this game today, be sure to use the link in the description of this video to sign up for free. It's an absolutely fantastic game and it's only going to grow as time goes on. But until next time, as always everybody, take care and fair seas.